am Sarah Delau, as you guys know, back on my Monday show. It's so good to be back. And I'm joined by trade unionist and nurse Harry Eccles. Harry, how are you today?
Hello, yeah, I'm really good, thanks. How are you doing?
Great. Yes, good, thank you. We're really, really happy to have you. I know that Ben was the one that reached out to you and said, come on, turn left. And we were all like, oh my God, yes, get Harry on. So we're really, really happy to have you here and to get your insight. So, yes, super exciting. Um, but we're going to get Harry's insight on what you ask. Coming up on tonight's show, big, big news. Keir Starmer resigns as a Labour leader and will set out a timetable for his departure as Prime Minister. Israel and Donald Trump are currently at odds, and a survivor has claimed that she was silenced by Rupert Lowe's inquiry because her abusers, were white. You can help us grow by visiting turnleftmedia.co.uk/support to help fund our work, or by becoming a YouTube member for just 99p. But without further ado, on to our first story, all about Keir. Keir Starmer has announced he will be stepping down as Prime Minister.
That is why I will resign as leader of the Labour Party. I have spoken to His Majesty the King this morning to inform him of my decision. I will ask the National Executive Committee of the Labour Party to set out a timetable with nominations opening on the 9th of July and completed by the summer recess. In the case of a contest, this will ensure a new leader is in place before Parliament returns in September. I will remain in post as Prime Minister until the contest is complete, and I will do everything I can to ensure an orderly handover of power.
But even Even in his resignation, he couldn't help but do one more U-turn in classic Starmer fashion. This is what Starmer said when Andy Burnham won the by-election in Makerfield.
But if there is a contest, just to be clear with you, then yes, I will run, I will stand, and I've said repeatedly, I'm not going to walk away from that.
Can we just sit with that? He said verbatim, he's going to stick to this. He's not going to go anywhere. It doesn't, hindsight's a wonderful thing. Starmer wasn't the only one to U-turn. For weeks, Wes Streeting was adamant he would stand in a leadership contest. Now he's back in Burnham. I've been setting out ideas to change our country, a plan for Britain to grow again and grow together with a progressive capitalism focused on wealth creation as much as wealth distribution, to lead the world in the fourth industrial revolution and protect people from its risks, to modernise our public services, to give Britain energy security, to build stronger alliances with democracies around the world, and a new special relationship with Europe, and to change the culture of our party so that it is more inclusive and open to ideas. Having spoken at length with Andy in recent days, I'm convinced that there is a place for those ideas under his leadership, that he is committed to building an inclusive party that draws on the best of our political traditions, and that he can win the fight of our lives against the forces of nationalism. We could spend the summer exaggerating small differences, or we can roll up our sleeves and help him to deliver the change our party and our country needs. That is the choice that I'm making, and I hope that everyone else will back Andy too. Can we go back to the inclusive part that they were talking about? Because that is just, I don't know, they are not inclusive at all. I don't think they'll ever become inclusive. For months, Burnham has been spoken about as the obvious alternative to Starmer. And now that speculation has moved from background noise to an open Westminster crisis. Notice how Starmer still smeared Corbyn's Labour. You changed from a party that cared about people's material interests and wanted to at least try and amplify Palestinian voices to a genocide-supporting war machine. The real story here is that Labour won a historic majority and still managed to make millions of people feel like nothing fundamental was going to change. That is the political failure sitting underneath all of this. And what we see currently is that this is what happens when a government comes into office promising change, but governs as though the entire purpose of politics is to reassure the establishment that nothing too serious will happen. Starmer had a majority, a relatively actually weak opposition, to be fair, and a country that was so desperate for something different, desperate for change after 14 years of Tory rule. Yet instead of using that power to confront the forces that have made Britain poorer, sicker, and even more unequal. His government spent its energy managing expectations, retreating from promises, more anti-migrant sentiment, making trans lives harder, making kids poorer. It literally does not make sense. There's no morality in this Labour government. People did not vote for Labour because they wanted a slightly better administrator of national decline. They voted because these public services are collapsing and rents are impossible to pay and wages are not stretching far enough into the month because they're too busy trying to pay for rent that their landlord has put up. Disabled people being squeezed, young people literally being, locked out of housing, can't get onto the property ladder, and the NHS being left to rot after years of the vandalism that the Tory party have inflicted upon it. So the tragedy, I think, of Starmerism is that it looked at all of that suffering and still decided that the safest political strategy was to offend as few powerful people as possible. Let's not forget, the whole Mandelson crisis that took place not that long ago. The fear is Starmer's replacement will simply just offer the same politics with a different accent, one that maybe comes from Manchester, and then nothing meaningful will have changed as a result. It will just be another face managing the same decline. And as you saw in his speech, he announced, that nominations will be open. There's an opening, to run for leader, and he will resign as Prime Minister once a new leader has been elected. But the problem is that there may not even be a contest at this point, because Andy Burnham has confirmed he will be running. And despite Wes Streeting claiming he's also running for the last couple of weeks, he has come out and backed Andy. So will there even be a leadership election, or will it be a coronation? Will this mean another general election? The question should be simple. What is Labour for? If not to materially improve the lives of working people and challenge the power of those who profit from their misery. Because if Labour can't answer that, then changing leaders will not solve the crisis. I think it will just make it even harder. Many people, particularly on the right, are calling out the hypocrisy of Burnham. He's called for general elections when the leadership changed, although Burnham hasn't ruled out a general election if he were to become Prime Minister, so their calls of hypocrisy might be slightly premature. What people haven't called out is this. I've never taken part in a coup against my leader of any... Sorry, let me start again. I've never taken part in any coup against any leader of the Labour Party, and I am not going to start now. I don't know about that. Burnham was one of the few people who didn't publicly engage in the Corbyn chicken coup, but Starmer resigning to make way for a new leader, I think it's kind of a coup. With Starmer resigning and Streeting back in Burnham, is this a coronation, like I said? Well, not according to backbench Labour MPs. Darren Jones is being lobbied by dozens of Labour MPs to launch a leadership bid to stop an Andy Burnham coronation. Darren Jones? So it is a coronation then. Harry, let me just get your thoughts. What is Keir Starmer's legacy?
Somehow, impressively, I think his legacy has been to unite the left and the right in kind of utter kind of hopelessness and hatred of his premiership. I think for me, he's taken a huge opportunity after 15 years of Tory austerity, and I was, seeing that working as a nurse. We all felt that so keenly. We then got into a space where it was a majority of sandcastles, but we had a huge Labour majority. We thought we'd see some meaningful change, and lots of us had given up hope before that, but I think some of us still clung on. And it just seems like every attempt to undermine any meaningful change for working people in this country, Starmer has stopped it at every turn. So for me, I think his legacy is going to be one of disappointment and heartbreak for those people who believed in him, but also a legacy of really putting the final nail in the coffin of the Labour Party, because it's hard to see how, without changing those things that you so eloquently mentioned in your introduction, how anything is going to ever change. It feels so far removed from its original purpose of changing the material conditions of working people, of making things better for those who rely on the government and rely on those things around us. So I think his legacy is going to be one of utter failure, really, and I think it's from choosing to take that BlackRock money instead of putting the needs of the people he was elected to represent first.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Yeah, you're right. I think there was just no direction, and I think what they particularly Starmer and his cabinet, what happened was that when the Overton window shifted right. They too just shifted right with it because they were so keen to just keep some sort of base. But like they'd already lost their loyal Labour base anyway, the minute that they started U-turning the way that they did. So their legacy, you're absolutely right, is one that's rooted in failure and avoidable blunders, to be honest. Do you think this is simply the collapse of Starmer personally, or could this potentially be the collapse of the entire Labour strategy of promising change whilst governing as though nothing fundamental can change?
I think the latter. This isn't a personality issue, and this is my problem about people getting excited over the by-election. Like, it's not Starmer. If we go back 2 years or even 3 years, people were saying, "Oh, look at Keir Starmer. He's respectable. He's well liked. He can unite the centre and the left. He stands on PR. He stands for wealth taxes. He stands on all these things." And it's exactly the same thing that they're saying about Burnham now. The problem is that Starmer was, steering a ship that already had its course set. And if you look at every step that was taken to cut the democracy of local Labour parties, that was taken to expel socialists, that was taken to undermine every kind of growth momentum of membership and real organised movement and power, under Jeremy Corbyn that we saw really revived. All those things have come home to roost now. And I think the Labour Party is so unrecognisable for those people it's meant to serve. And I say that as a trade unionist. I say that, I spend my time with comrades who've invested their life into the Labour Party, who are looking at it going, we can't even pretend it's the same anymore. The people who've said for the last 5 or 10 years and lived through New Labour and clung on hope, and even after Corbyn, who've said, well, surely there's got to be hope around the corner, it just changes slightly. I honestly do not believe we would have the far right in the position they are in this country if it wasn't for Keir Starmer, because when you have that emptiness, that vacuum created by neoliberal policies and by a complete failure to bring hope, you've got people who've been so desperate they've been unable to get GP appointments, they've unable to afford their bills, they're unable to find housing, and then finally Tory austerity came to an end. Labour came in the name of Labour, and that association with socialism, with the trade union movement, and it let them down. So people can rightly say, well, look at left wing, look at socialism, it's not making anything better, they're all the same. It's just a con, it's just a myth. And it seems true to people. And actually, the only reason that we've seen reform now top of the polls is because of that failed centrism and because of that failed neoliberalism. So I think it's even worse than just not doing what it should do, because in that vacuum, in that space that's left, you've had this kind of horrific, insidious narrative that we see from Reform UK and Restore Britain taking hold. And I think that's a direct result of Labour's failure. So I think it's institutional. I think it's nothing to do with the man. And I think people who are excited now about Burnham will see that in another year or two when we're in exactly the same place as we are now.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and I agree with you. We spoke about this just briefly before we got onto the show. That we don't believe that there'll be much change, despite Starmer's resignation. You've got people like hooting and hollering, like, yeah, Starmer's gone. I'm like, yeah, okay. And then who will replace him? Because you're absolutely right. The failures of the Labour Party are so deeply entrenched in it that it's now an institutional just failure as a whole. Like, it's just, there are so many holes in the Labour Party. And I do still think, and I said this when we did an analysis of the by-election last week, that Burnham is still part of that Labour Party machine. Burnham has been part of Labour for a very long time, and he's seen certain things happen within the Labour Party. He knows everything about the Labour Party, really. So I still think that he will just mould himself into what the Labour Party is now. And whether he has anything tangible at the moment, I think is something that we need to just question when it comes. So if let's entertain the idea that Andy Burnham, does replace Starmer, what would he actually need to do differently to prove this is not just another personality swap at the top of the Labour Party?
Well, almost everything differently to what he's doing now. And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with what you said there, because if we were to go back before Keir Starmer under Jeremy Corbyn and someone were to say Andy Burnham left wing, you burst out laughing. He wanted to stand against Corbyn. When he was Health Secretary, he presided over increased PFI and privatisation of the NHS. And every noise that he's made as we've got close to this election shows that arrogance that people are fed up with Labour, that he's not even trying to say things like, yes, we'll tax the wealthy, we'll do this. He said we'll continue austerity, we'll continue the hostile immigration policies, we'll use more migrant detention centres. He's refused to call the genocide in Gaza a genocide.
Yeah.
he doesn't even feel the need to convince left-wing voters, because it's that arrogance, that assumption that left-wing voters will stay with them because they've got nowhere else to go. And that's the arrogance that I think people are getting fed up on. And it only won him a by-election, but I don't think it will win the nation, because it's empty rhetoric. And I think for me, this is the thing. Like, if he's serious and he genuinely wants to bring people back to the left, because I always think politics, it's not football. It's not like you're born United or City. Like, you support the party that's actually going to make things better, right? And if Labour, if Burnham comes in radically and says, not only says he's going to do things, but actually says, right, we're going to hold the next general election under PR. We're going to institute a wealth tax as our first act. We're going to put in renationalisation of infrastructure, of energy, of transport, and reverse nationalisation of the NHS. Then yeah, we'll obviously get behind him. And I've had people saying that to me, but I'm saying to them, but where's this coming from? Because it's not coming from Burnham. It's coming from our hope. People just wishing that was the case, but there's no evidence to suggest that that's a reality. So unless it was a fundamental shift in absolutely everything that Labour's doing now, we're just going to have more of the same.
Completely agree with you. I've got just one final question. Do you think Burnham should call an early general election? As some are calling him on him to do it. Yeah. So do you think he should do that? Because if we go back to Gordon Brown didn't, and he wasn't around for that long because he didn't do it. But yeah, what do you think? Do you think he should call for an early general election?
I guess there's different ways to answer that. There's the should from like a morality kind of standpoint, and the should from a strategic one. I think if he wanted to kind of carry on his kind of ego-driven, kind of bold strategy that he's kind of done to get to where he is now, you know, he's risked the Manchester mayoralty, he risked the Makerfield constituency, all to put himself in this position. If he wanted to kind of continue that bravado, he could win, but all he'd win is a majority that Labour already have now. And I think, like, what would be the point? And I think if he were to do that, to me, that's him saying that he can't, within 3 years his policies would fall flat, so he needs to have another 5, which would just make me think, okay, he's going to do more of the same and just try and keep doing the things, you know, the same, getting BlackRock's priorities through, selling off the NHS, etc. And then you have the one around like morality, like from a democratic sense. But I mean, we're not presidential. Like, the prime minister is that. The prime minister, he represents a government, he represents a party. Like, this isn't, I don't want to move to prime ministerial politics because I don't think that's healthy. It's not about individuals, it's not about kind of one person, it's about a party and a movement. So I don't think he necessarily should call a general election. I think reform would still win. I think we shouldn't get the Burnham effect that we saw in Makerfield. Had loads of different aspects to it. It was he was a local lad, and that means a lot there. It was also just one seat up for grabs and people willing to kind of hold their nose. That does not translate into a general election, where I think we would still see Reform being the biggest party at the minute, sadly. So I think strategically he shouldn't, and also morally, I don't think there's necessarily the case to. Labour had a big majority. You know, people who voted Labour in their constituency, unless they live in Keir Starmer's constituency, didn't vote for him. They voted for their local MP.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. But it's interesting. People did vote for their local MPs, but then when we had the local council elections recently, people were voting on national issues, which was really odd. I was like, wait, but what are you moved by in your local area that you feel like needs, you know, attending to? And it felt like people were still voting based off of national issues that they felt disgruntled by. So I'm very pessimistic, and I think I've been consistent in being such a pessimist. I'm optimistic but pessimistic in the nation. I think the nation don't want reform. I do genuinely believe that, but I still think that they are angry about the things that reform are really putting out there and restore, like this idea of migration taking things from us, and migrants taking things from us, and the NHS is failing. They're all very angry about these things, but they just don't know where to point their anger to. And I find that Labour really have a job on their hands to try and dismantle this idea, because they've been really drilling home the anti-migrant rhetoric, the anti-trans rhetoric, etc., and have really turned their back on working people. That there are just a bunch of people just like, hey, I don't know what you stand for, because you've kind of tried to replicate and mirror the rhetoric of those who are on the right. So I think there is just a job to be had, and I worry whether the nation will, I don't know, believe the Labour Party going forward. So I guess
And
we'll
that's on
see.
us, isn't it, as a
Yeah.
wider movement, because I think that vacuum is there and it's filled, and we allow it to be filled. Labour ran on "Stop the Tories, we're not them" last time. They've just won this on "We're not Reform," but no
Mm.
actual answers. Reform are offering answers, but they don't quite stack up. So that's when the left, as a movement, the movement, the trade union movement, we need to be up in our political education. We need to be out there having those conversations, because I think it's when we don't do that, it's so easy to kind of take advantage of that anger, because it's so rife and the anger is so justified. People are
Mm.
hard done by, they are being ripped
They
off,
are.
everything's expensive, nothing works, there's no hope, we're fed up, and Reform are coming along and saying, I've got a little pill here that will fix it all, that we know to be not true. But what are Labour saying? Labour are just saying, well, we're not them, whilst trying to parrot them. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right there.
Yeah. No, great points, Harry. Thank you so much. Let's go on to our second story. What about Trump and Israel and Netanyahu? Uh, Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu. Sorry, let me start again. Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu appear to be clashing over the direction of US policy in the Middle East. And while some people may be tempted to treat this as a strange bit of right wing drama, it is much more dangerous than that. Reuters reported that Netanyahu and Trump are on a collision course after the US and Iran agreed to pact to halt the war. According to that reporting, the deal falls short of Israel's war aims. Israel's war. I don't know what I've done here. The deal falls short of Israel's war aims and could constrain Israel operations in Lebanon. And Israel has said it is not bound by the agreement. Um, this matters because we're not talking about a personal, beefing between two politicians who do not like each other. We got to talk about the US, Israel, Iran, and Lebanon, and Hezbollah, the Strait of Hormuz, oil markets, nuclear negotiations, regional war, and the lives of millions of civilians just caught in between that. Whenever the ones making these decisions are just always caught in the crossfire of these egotistical men, and they're always forced to live with those sorts of consequences. As we know the Strait of Hormuz is one of the most important energy routes in the world, and when tensions rise around it, ordinary people across the globe can end up paying the price through higher energy costs, higher shipping costs, higher food prices, higher fuel prices, and greater economic instability. And that is before we even get to the human cost of war itself, which is always sanitized by politicians until it becomes impossible to ignore. And this is the most morbid and terrifying reality of imperial politics. When you've got these powerful leaders just gambling with war, it's not them who suffer. It's like we said, it's the civilians in Lebanon and families in Iran, Palestinians in Gaza, Israeli civilians as well, fearing retaliation, and workers across the world watching these things just increase around them. So people are suffering left, right, and centre. I think what makes this even more obscene is the language that they use to describe it. They always talk about it through the lens of deterrence and regional stability, and through this, I don't know, this lens of like security. It's all about security, and strategic interests, which is something the British have said quite a bit. The UK have said that quite a bit throughout the wars that have happened so far. But underneath all of that, we see the inherent suffering that's happening around us. People literally fleeing these countries because of airstrikes, and workers unable to afford basic goods, and entire societies being treated as pieces on some sort of geopolitical game, some game of chess. So this interaction between Trump and Netanyahu is a fracture inside an imperial alliance during an active regional crisis. And when these military alliances begin to split under pressure, the danger is not automatically that there will be peace. The danger is that each of these individuals, Trump and Netanyahu, they just start trying to prove strength and protect their image and escalate things before they appear weak. And that's the scariest part. But I want to unpack this with Harry. Harry, how dangerous is this moment when the US and Israel appear to be pulling in different directions, whilst the wider region is still so unstable?
I mean, it does feel dangerous. It's hard to think about it feeling particularly dangerous now, because it's felt dangerous for years. And I think particularly for people living in the region, living in Lebanon, living in Palestine, living in Iran. Um, and I think one of the difficulties is like when, Netanyahu and Trump, when they've been teamed up together, they've caused so much untold suffering and pain around the world, in just the huge loss of, catastrophic loss of human life that we can't even fathom or comprehend. And I find it's one of those strange things when we talk about how it actually affects us here, by usually through trade and through oil, that we really start to think about, like you said, they call it about our national interest and our security. But sometimes I think I find it weird that protecting civilians and the loss of life of children isn't in our national interest because we're all human beings. Surely that's in all our interests. And I think what you see with Trump, I mean, you've got two men, like you said, two men who are trying to escape their own crimes. They're both, guilty of war crimes. Donald Trump is also fleeing his sexual crimes as well. And that ever increasing violence keeps them safer. As there's more chaos and more violence and more war, then somebody needs protecting, like, oh, we need to keep our country safe. And it's like, well, yes, but you're also the ones going out there bombing everyone that is creating the war that you're now saying you need to keep yourself safe from. And I think it's so hard to kind of unpacks it's so complicated. But there's also the fact that you've got Netanyahu's ideology. He clearly, like, he's obviously trying to keep himself out of prison, but he obviously, there's a huge ideological hatred for the people of Palestine, Lebanon, and the people in Iran. Now, Trump's ideology is much harder to unpick because he just seems to love being the big man and to love money and power and influence, which almost makes him more unpredictable. And I think, like, for him, this is where oil becomes almost a bigger motivator than maybe traditional elite American presidential allegiances and their kind of longer term military industrial complex alliance with Israel. So I think it is dangerous. I think it's dangerous for not just those directly involved for whom it's been dangerous for a long time. I think it's dangerous for a world where we are so heavily reliant on the movement of goods and we're so heavily reliant on oil. The news on a daily basis talks about the movement of people as if it's this awful thing, not forgetting that actually the movement of people is made worse by people like Trump and Netanyahu who destroy whole towns, villages, and people's homes. But we don't talk about the movement of goods so much. But we're so reliant on things from afar because we like to have our strawberries in the winter. We're so reliant on oil to sustain our kind of lifestyles that we've become accustomed to. And I think this is where those systems also hold some accountability. Like when the ugly side of it is shown, as it kind of clearly is now with Trump, for example, we forget that actually that ugly side's been there a long, long time, just in that kind of uber consumerist capitalist society that's based on unending growth and sustaining higher and higher kind of human demands. So yeah, I think it's dangerous. I think it's worrying, and my heart just goes out to those that are living with the much more real effects that they can't get away from, that they can't escape from, people living in that region, either in fear for their lives or mourning for their families and loved one that that they've already lost.
You're right. And it's interesting because with Trump, the only thing to unpick is that Trump does what Trump wants to do because Trump wants it. Like Trump just does what serves his own interests. And for him, I know I've always said that he's a war crimes enthusiast and he will just go where there is profit and where he can I come out of it and have his persona, this facade that he likes to put on, seem noble and peaceful and all this sort of stuff. I don't think he even wants to pretend to be peaceful. I think he just knows that he knows he's unliked. He knows he's not a liked person, but he's like, what can I do to just line my pockets even more? So it's only about his interests. Netanyahu, is that, you're absolutely right. He is just trying to avoid going to prison because he knows the minute that any of this stops, the minute that this comes to a halt, he will be in court having to answer for the things that he has done. So prolonging war serves in his interest completely. Do you think Western media treats this too much like a personality clash between the two of them rather than a crisis that's been produced by huge amounts of like militarism, occupation, and imperial power?
Yeah, I mean, the media is just, the essential extra part of that same system. It's so Orwellian that it is kind of terrifying. And what I find even stranger is that Elon Musk always talks about 1984 Orwell, forgetting that he is one of the biggest characters in it. Like that lack of awareness just amazes me because in 1984 it talks about there always needing to be a war, right, in order to sustain the system. And it also talks, peace is war. And you've got Donald Trump naming this the Ministry of War, giving himself the FIFA Peace Prize and bullying the last winner of the Nobel Peace Prize into giving it to him, because he's so desperate to bomb his way to peace. It's almost become a time where you have to like spot the fake headline from the Onion headline from like the real headline. It's become so hard these days. But the media is a big part of that because the media seeks to sustain and to preserve, right? If we look at who owns the media, we've got people like Rupert Murdoch, Lord Rothermere, billionaires who don't pay their taxes, who are part of this global elite, who want the bombs to keep on falling. They want to keep selling papers, and they want to keep peddling hate on the people that are then fleeing the war that, has been created by the bombs that are falling. And it's Western nations that are profiting from it and selling it. So it's so easy to be like, oh, look, it's this one rogue person, right? Rather than them being symptomatic. And this is the problem. Donald Trump is symptomatic of he's a symptom of the sickness of kind of unregulated capitalism, techno-feudalism, kind of neoliberal politics that America has become. And I think it's the same that we're seeing, here with our politicians. It's symptomatic. It's too easy to blame the person. It's too easy to blame, like, oh, it's Nigel Farage. We could say that here, right? But it's not. This is years of broken promises, of austerity, of deregulation, of media loss of trust, but also manipulation and headlines on a daily basis, blaming migrants, blaming migrants, blaming migrants. So I think they do that, A, because it sells papers. We all like to think we're in, like, a novel or a film. It makes us feel safe. Oh, that's the good person, that's the bad person. Oh, let's fight the baddie. But in reality, it's way more complex. And if it wasn't Trump doing this, it'd be someone else. I think the really interesting thing with Trump is that he says the quiet part out loud. And it's actually really telling. It's very revealing into what actually goes on and the reason they do stuff. It's like when he invaded Venezuela and they said, oh, it's for the oil, and you had all these British media companies saying, of course it's not for the oil, and giving all these reasons, and they went live to Trump and he went, it's for the oil, mate. Like, but it's almost like they made his excuses before he made it, because that's their job, to try and paint these lovely complex pictures and go, it's not actually this broken system, that because they're part of it and they're beneficiaries of it. So I think the media do that, and I think it's an intentional aspect of a very tightly controlled and media.
Well said, Harry. I can't add on to that. Thank you. That was really great insight, really great analysis. Before we move on, it is 2026, and we really want this year to be big for Turn Left, as you guys know. We want to be more ambitious than last year and really put ourselves on the map. We want this year to... What did I say? We want this to be the year where we can have a studio where our contributors can be paid properly for the work that they do. Like, look at this incredible analysis. Come on. From Harry, not from me, by the way. I'm talking about Harry. And where independent socialist media can keep growing, without relying on billionaires, for God's sake, corporate sponsors, or the same establishment money that corrupts so much of our media landscape. Hello, look what the media's doing, making it seem as though it's some sort of personality clash when actually they're both fucking idiots, Trump and Netanyahu. Your support over the years has been amazing. We're ready to take this to the next level. We rely on small donations, so if you want to be part of a media organisation that seeks to challenge the powerful, expose the oligarchs, and speak honestly about the world we live in, then please head over to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support. There you can support us monthly on Patreon, make a one-time contribution, or become a YouTube member for just 99p. Final story. Femi Mohammed, who has posted a public statement on Twitter, otherwise known as X, claiming that Rupert Lowe's rape inquiry ignored her because her abusers were white and that she was a Muslim. I'm speaking out in the public interest, not only as a survivor myself, but for all the women and girls of colour, black and Muslim, whose voices have been systematically erased from the narrative of justice and accountability. I was encouraged to participate in Rupert Lowe's rape gang inquiry by Sammy Woodhouse, who was contacted by a family member regarding my cases. I submitted evidence starting in August 2025 and participated in stages 1 and 2 of the inquiry, signing consent forms for my inclusion, which I detailed my sexual assault, threats and attack on my life, and the corruption, collusion and manipulation of my cases by institutional authorities who were supposed to protect me. On the 23rd, January 2026, Sammy Woodhouse personally messaged me to invite me to attend the inquiry hearings on the 4th of February 2026 between 2 to 3 p.m. I accepted the invite on the 24th of January that year, and Sammy booked my train tickets, emailing them to me on the 26th of January that year. Within 2 days, everything changed and I was removed from attending the hearings. On the 28th of January, I received a text message from Sammy Woodhouse asking me to call her. Having spoken to her on numerous occasions, she did not seem her usual self and failed to provide a reason for my exclusion. Sammy Woodhouse is someone I had a lot of respect for, and it became apparent to me that the decision had come from someone at the top of the inquiry. I felt betrayed and violated and was left in a state of shock, confusion and despair. On the 26th of January 2026, I received a genetic my goodness, a generic email from Sammy Woodhouse stating that I would not be required to give evidence. The small, my goodness, I think I need glasses. The email was sent via Keir, one of the rape gang inquiry support advocates, rather than directly from inquiry lead Sammy Woodhouse herself. It offered no explanation for my removal post-election. I responded directly to Sammy and Keir requesting clarification. Keir replied that she would speak to Sammy and get back to me. The call from Keir never came and I received no further communication from Sammy Woodhouse. On the 3rd of February 2026, concerned about how my information would be used, I requested confirmation that my contributions and documents be permanently withdrawn from the inquiry records. Femi has provided screenshots of emails and text messages. Femi also alleged that Ben Habib allegedly failed to release the second part of her recorded podcast interview. Femi says there was never any serious question over the legitimacy of her abuse claims and says Ben Habib was provided with CPS documents relating to her attempts to take action. She is now publicly asking why her interview has not been released. Attached to her tweet thread in regards to Ben Habib, Femi shared screenshots of a WhatsApp conversation between Habib and Donna. Now, you can pause that and have a read of it if you want to. I do think we need to be, careful here. These are Femi Mohammed's claims, and we are not a court. But so I cannot sit here and legally determine every detail of what happened. But what I can say is that when a survivor says she feels silenced, especially in the context of a political project that claims to be about giving survivors a voice, providing safer spaces, I think that deserves serious scrutiny. And I think we can all agree with that. And that was just a snapshot of her story. Curtis also had a phone conversation with Femi Mohammed, which he said, this is a much bigger story. What we do know is Rupert Lowe's gang inquiry is bogus. It's full of misinformation with no proper scrutiny or oversight, and it even includes a completely fabricated claim. The scale of the crimes committed is staggering. It has previously been established that at the very least 250,000 young white girls have been subjected to repeated rape, gang rape, trafficking, torture, pregnancy, forced Islamic conversion, and lifelong trauma. The number is completely made up, as the Canary reports. That 250,000 figure is a complete and utter fabrication. It links to a May 2019 parliamentary debate in which Malcolm Pearson of UKIP cited the figure without support. This in turn obscures the fact that Pearson was referring to his own extrapolation from an October 2018 debate, where he says, "My lords, do the government accept that if we extrapolate nationally the J report on Rotherham and the other reports from Telford and Oxford, there appear to have been upwards of 250,000 young white girls raped in this century, very largely by Muslim men." And this is where I get really uncomfortable with it all, because it does feel like they are playing with the lives of these victims as though it's some sort of political football, and they're treating these survivors as props. They are not campaign material for you to use for your headlines, for your culture wars. They are not evident. Is the graphics alert? Sorry. They are not evidence. Oh, it's okay. They're not evidence folders to be picked up, when convenient, and put down when it's too complicated, or put down when it doesn't suit your narrative because the victim is black or brown or Muslim and doesn't fulfill your skewed narrative. If someone is building their whole political brand around listening to victims of horrible crimes, then the absolute minimum requirement is that victims are treated with dignity and consistency and respect and safeguarding and care and this trauma-informed approach, not just when their testimony supports a preferred narrative, but also when I think it does complicate the narrative slightly because it goes against everything that Rupert Lowe is saying. And that is why Femi Mohammed's statement matters. I'm not pretending to be, person who leads court, and I'm not claiming to verify every detail of every allegation. But again, when someone says that they gave an interview, provided documents, and then watch their voice disappear from the public conversation, it raises a very basic question about who gets heard, who gets platformed, and who gets quietly pushed aside and silenced and not believed. This is why people do not come forward and report. And this is why it's even harder for black and brown women to come forward and say that I am a victim of X, Y, and Z, or I have been through X, Y, and Z, sexual assault, rape, whatever, whatever. Because we have institutions that are racist, institutions that are misogynistic. And when those two things come hand in hand, it makes it even harder for the likes of people like Femi Mohammed to even say, yeah, I've been through what I've been through. Can you help me? For years, the grooming gang, quote unquote scandal, has been weaponized by the far right as though their interest is justice for survivors. But too often, the actual survivors become secondary to the racial politics being built around them. And I think the moment a survivor story can be used to demonize Muslims, migrants, or entire communities, the right treats the testimony as something that's really sacred and like, yeah, we should believe them and let's platform them. But when someone like Femi Mohammed disrupts that narrative, or when the failures involve institutions and police and councils and class and misogyny and racism and poverty and all of these things that intersect, then I think it has people uncomfortable. Let's put it like that. Fahim Mohammed is saying, I gave my story, I gave my documents, I recorded the interview, and now what's happening as a result, and it's people just not giving her a chance to say what it is that she has been through, and that is the saddest part to it all. Harry, we do have to be careful when discussing matters when they are allegations, but what's your response to this quote-unquote report?
I mean, it's really tough. I mean, as a nurse, I've worked with people who have been victims of systemic and systematic abuse and institutional abuse, and it's always heartbreaking that any individual has to go through that, and it's something as a society we should do absolutely everything we can to stop. And it's also something that is really, understandably, rightly so, really upsetting and triggering for a lot of people. I think when you look at this report, and I did take a look at it because it's one of those things that if there's any chance that systemic abuse is going on unchallenged, like it's everyone's duty, it's our duty as a society to do everything that we can to stop it. But the thing that's clear with this report is that it's flawed methodology, it's got flawed funding, it's completely flawed. Like if you have any research understanding at all as an advanced nurse practitioner, that's one of the pillars of our practice. The methodology is completely bogus. It's complete nonsense. There's so much in it that what it's done, it has both tarnished like the real experience of those people who have been abused, as well as, like you say, making it harder for people who don't fit that narrative to have their voices heard. And it's made it into something it's not, because this is a conversation that should be held about abuse, about perversion, about usually patriarchal kind of systems and corrupt systems that fail children and young people. And that is a conversation that we do need to have. This isn't a conversation about race or religion. They're shoehorning it into that to try and prove their narrative. And as disgusting and horrific as the crimes are that we're talking about, it is equally as disgusting and horrific to use that, to weaponize that trauma, that real trauma that people have faced, and to turn it against equally innocent people who've done nothing wrong. And the way that this has been used, and the way that the report, alludes to these things, and it doesn't matter how it words it, because that's the figure that the headline that's being parroted around the world, that's the figure that Elon Musk and everyone is running with. And it's just using it to forward violence that we're seeing, very real violence against brown people, against Muslim communities. We saw it in Edinburgh just this week, tragically, and it makes me so angry that people would do that. And I think the very fact that the report was funded by private finance, and we know where Restore's funding comes from because it was revealed by the Telegraph, no less, this week, that it's funded by neo-Nazi groups. The fact that it's got completely flawed methodology, and the fact that we have people coming forward saying, I was shut out of this, I was ignored from this. And we all saw at the United Kingdom rally, not this one, the last one, a woman took to the stage to share her experience of abuse, and she said that her abuser was white, and they pulled her off the stage. And you just think, this is not about protecting the vulnerable in society. It's about racism, pure and simple. And when you challenge people and say, well, actually, white British men make up 83% of the male population, but they make up 88% of all sex crimes in this country, like it's more likely to be a white British man, people just now say, oh no, 250,000, as if it's truth. And that's the danger of this report. It puts misinformation out there. So I think it's the duty of all of us to make sure we call out the absolute nonsense that is in this report, whilst at the same time respecting that there are people that will have been abused by people of all nationalities from all walks of life. And the abuse survivors that I've looked after and that I've nursed never once talk about the race or religion of their abuser. That's not the relevant thing. And I think it's really important that we continue to allow safe spaces that aren't turned into these theatres of cruelty for people to come forward who have been abused, where they can be heard, be believed, and get the support they need, whilst we can continue to dismantle structures that are oppressive and do enable systematic abuse.
You're absolutely right. And I feel like whenever I'm on the show, I always speak about something related to violence against women and girls, and how the right just consistently make victims this footnote in their arguments, and it's just a tiring thing to contend with, that we are trying our hardest to say that these are failures that are so deeply entrenched in British society, that are as a result of the lack of accountability that men will take, and you still have men who are leading the discussion and saying, no, but your story doesn't matter, but we're going to take your story because it fulfills our narrative. And whilst we're at it, let's actually just push this agenda of anti-migrant sentiment, you know? So, yeah, I think it's probably a good opportunity to go to our comments, really. I think maybe we could do that. Unless you have anything else you want to say, Harry?
No, just that obviously if anyone listening is affected by it, like, please do reach out and get support, because it's one of those things where you want to be able to talk about it in a sensible way, and that's what the far right have completely ruined by making it into this nonsensical theatre. But obviously it is something that decent people do want to kind of do their bit to try and understand and to try and help, and there is support out there for people who need it.
Exactly that. Let's go to our comments. Thank you so much, Harry. You're absolutely right. Hey, Callum.
Hi. How are you
Good to
both?
have
Good
you.
show as always.
Wow, Harry's bloody excellent. Harry, when are you coming back? That's what we want to know.
We can
That's what
talk.
we wanna know.
Be glad to come back.
We can do it. So let me just have a look. We got quite a lot of comments from lots of people as usual. We'll start with the super chats, I think. Why not? Michael has gifted one turn left membership. Thank you very much, Michael. Excuse me. And we've had a £2 super chat donation from Wakas, who has said, first time donating, keep up the great work. Thank you very much. And welcome to the Turn Left community as well. Thank you very much for that one. Michael gifted another Turn Left membership, which we also appreciated. We've got quite a lot of comments. What I'm going to do, I'm going to go in reverse order of the stories, I think, because obviously the resignation stories, the biggest story sort of at the moment that everyone's talking about, but also that final story I think is a really important one to talk about as well. John the Brazen has said, one of my neighbours won't speak to my dad because he thinks that my dad doesn't care about grooming gangs just because he was a social worker who dealt with victims and paedophiles. There is this perception, isn't there, that the people who are involved with services to try and help people, because some services have... look, let's not beat around the bush, right? There have clearly been failings within social services. There have clearly been failings within some of the public sector services that have been involved with these scandals up and down the country. Like, that is something I think we can all agree on. But what I've noticed, and I think John speaks to it, is an increase in distrust and hatred towards the people whose job it is to help, which in and of itself is extremely unhelpful. I mean, Harry, what do you think about this one? Obviously, you work in a medical field. Are you finding that professionals are being trusted less and less because of the way that these stories are being spun?
I think it's a tale as old as time that the right-wing press will demonise those people in positions of support and help, because that they build trust and support at a local level. So you just have to look at the media at the minute, Marxist teachers or demonising doctors for striking for better pay. We had it ourselves as nurses when we went on the front line, demonising nurses, calling nurses lazy, blaming, and particularly if you also happen to be migrant as well, or people complaining about migrant GPs and all these things, when actually 40% of our GP population are migrants. And I think trying to create that distrust at that level, it just further makes people more vulnerable, and it goes to show what it really is about, because actually those vulnerable people, we need to have trust in those services that are there for people. We need people to feel comfortable reaching out to them, and it is completely true that we see failings in them. We see it happens all the time. It happens since Harold Shipman, and sadly it will always happen. We need to try and make services as safe as possible and call it out, but we need to be true about it, and statistically recognise that it's such a small majority of people within those institutions that have done that, and that still hold services to account and make sure we are always striving for better. Um, but we've got to be careful not to create this mistrust in people, because services are there for people who need them, and they need to be there
Exactly.
when people need them.
I just want to bring a quick update on this story as well. So we've just been contacted from directly by Femi Mohammed. She's actually put another statement out on Twitter today at about 21 minutes past 7. So this went out just before we went live this evening. Restore Britain have announced that they will be standing Marlon West as the candidate in the Manchester mayoral by-election, and Femi has put a statement out where she names Marlon as somebody that was involved in the experience that she went through in terms of the way in which the inquiry was handled and her involvement with the inquiry. I'm not going to read the whole statement to you now on air just because it is quite long, but if anyone is interested in hearing more about Femi's story, you can find her on X at Femi_Mohammed1, where she's put another statement out, including screenshots of messages and other things. Obviously, like we've said, when there's allegations made like this, we've got to be careful as well with what we can say. But I would just recommend that people just go and read what she's put out. She's issued a public statement, so go and take a look at it for yourself. Actual Intrepid has said about the likes of Lowe that they're not really interested in female SA abuse in female SA abuse justice, because they are clearly on the side of the manosphere misogynistic movements on the right, which comes alongside Jacqueline's comment that says, look at Andrew Tate grooming young boys to be the future predators, and isn't Tate one of the reasons that Starmer's brought in the online safety bill? But why punish children? Why not ban people like Tate? I mean, there's a separate question there about the Online Safety Act and the plans, the social media ban for under 16s. But on the grooming gang point though, it is true, isn't it, that we're not speaking in hyperbole when we say these people actually don't care about violence against women and girls. I'm sure by now we've all seen the clip of Thangam Debonair completely losing her mind at Sarah Poachin on election night over the fact that they only seem to talk about it when the perpetrators are brown. Why do they do this? I mean, I know the answer is racism, but I'm trying to generate a conversation. But what do you know what I mean? What's it all about? Why are they so intent on ignoring other examples, to the point where, as Harry points out, they're willing to drag people off stage because the perpetrator of their abuse was the wrong shade of skin colour?
It just doesn't fulfill their narrative. I think it traces back to, like, the lies that were told during like the colonial era, like when they would paint people in Africa as savage and barbaric and as the other. I think people still are rooted in the rhetoric of just othering, the us versus them. I always think that it's rooted in power. People want to retain as much power as possible, and call it for what it is. It's obviously racism, but I still do think that lens of like colonialism still precedes itself, because there is still this they're not saying explicitly that they are savage, barbaric people coming from Africa, but they are saying there's these people coming in on boats and you should be scared of them because they're going to rape our girls. And what they're doing is they are positing themselves as the possessors and havers of women. They've completely dehumanized and objectified them to the point where it's like, oh, we're your possession and you have to protect us because we're feeble and we're pathetic and all this sort of stuff. But actually, they're not having the right conversations. They're not speaking to every survivor. They're just merely, like we said, making them a footnote. But again, I think it's just because it's not going to fulfill their narrative to score points politically. When it comes to garnering as much anger when it comes to garnering as many votes as possible, you need to garner as much anger as possible. And to make people angry is to point in a different direction. If it wasn't black and brown people today, it would be the disabled people tomorrow, and it has been disabled people before. If it's not disabled people, then it's the likes of people that went on to the Jeremy Kyle show that they think are just living on the dole, and skimming from the hardworking people of Britain. So there is always another and other in a narrative. This narrative to do with violence against women and girls tends to be centered around race, and when it comes to money, it tends to be centered around quote unquote benefit scroungers and working class people who are living off the state. So it just different narrative.
And let's not forget that the statistics that showed just how many of these, so-called protectors of women and girls were actually responsible for committing domestic violence and domestic abuse themselves. I think it's worth remembering about that. So, Harry, did you want to add something on that?
It's just, I always think, like, remember what they're after, and they're after the vote of the white working class, because that's one of the greatest proportions of society, and often people who are disenfranchised and don't vote. So for the billionaires, the people who want power, they need their vote, so they have to find some way of doing that. And that's where this failure of the labour movement and trade union movement to hold those people and educate them that, yes, they are oppressed, but they're oppressed because of class structures, not because of anything else. Because of that void, they're being able to kind of be manipulated into thinking they're being oppressed for other reasons, this anti-white racism, which is obviously not true, but it's taking hold. And I think the way to resonate with them is to say, young women and children that they can relate to, that they're same colour, that they can kind of picture and imagine, that is a way of kind of getting through to them on an emotional level. And it's pure manipulation, and it's just to get their votes, and it's absolutely everything that Sarah said, and they're using those tricks as old as time, and it's because they need the votes. They can't stand out there and say, we want your votes because we want to oppress you and take all your money. So they have to find some way of tricking them into othering someone else. And what do they use? They use whatever it is, whatever narrative is going to resonate with them, whatever imagery is going to use, because it moves out of fact and into emotion. And it's vibe-based politics, but it's negative vibe-based politics, and it's working for them.
I don't know. I feel like some politicians could say that, and there would still be certain people in the electorate that would say, well, at least we need to vote for something change. We need to try something we've not had before. We've never had that, so let's try it. But yeah, no, really good point. Just moving on to the other story of the night. Edward Sexby has said the US and Israel need each other. Unless the US really changes its global imperial posture, they'll keep on propping Israel up. Thoughts on that one?
Unless the US really changes its global imperial posture, they'll keep on propping Israel up.
I mean, it's right, isn't it? There is at the moment under Trump, there is definitely a I don't want to use the word special relationship because that comes with other connotations, but there is definitely a desire from the US to support Israel to the hilt.
It's hard to tell, isn't it, where that power originates and where it comes first, because it's such an entwined and an old relationship that's kind of been symbiotic for these two imperialist cultures to survive and hold each other. So, yeah, I mean, I guess the sentiment I think there behind Edward's point around, like, unless there's real systemic change in either system, it's going to continue, right? Because they help to fulfill that narrative. Like, American talk can pitch itself as the savior of Israel, which kind of resonates and fits with a lot of their kind of MAGA Christianity and the things that they're doing, and these narratives can kind of coalesce. And obviously for Israel, it's got that massive support and benefactor in America, and it's very symbiotic. So it is hard to imagine that changing without a radical shift. And this is to forget that Trump for Israel didn't start. Support for Israel didn't start under Trump. It's been American policy for a long time, Democrat and Republican. So I think, it's very hard to see that changing unless there is a very significant radical revolution, which I hope there is, but I don't see happening anytime soon.
I think from Trump's perspective, though, I think there is also an element of the fact he just doesn't like to be humiliated, and I do think that most world leaders, including Netanyahu, are, I mean, I'll give Trump some credit in terms of his intelligence for what little he has, but he's very much aware of what people think of him, and he's very much aware of the international view of him, and doesn't really seem to mind. But he doesn't like when people humiliate him, and I think some of this perceived personality clash, as it's been sort of posed as, is also just Trump looking and thinking, well, actually, you're not going to pick on me. You're not going to get away with it because you're making me look like an idiot, and I'm the big boy here. And he's always got to one up everyone, even if the person he's trying to one up is a genocidal maniac. So, yeah. Go on, Sarah. Did you want to add something there?
No, sorry, I just hit my microphone accidentally.
That's all right. Obviously, just before we look at the other story, Specs has said, come hang out everyone after show. Voice chat is always a blast. All welcome. Join muted and chat in the side chat if you don't want to share your voice. This is on our Discord, where our community join and get together after the show. So yeah, please, excuse me, there's been links shared multiple times. I'm sure we'll get some more links in now as well. Join the Discord and feel free to join the voice chat after the show. So obviously, yeah, the whole Starmer resignation thing has been the main news headline for most today. Just on the topic of Trump that we were just talking about, Paul King has said Trump will take the credit for Starmer's departure. If only Keith had grovelled more to the Supreme Leader. I did think it was rather interesting that Donald Trump tweeted last night, while he put out on Truth Social last night, that Keir Starmer will resign, and then he went on to say that it was because he failed in immigration and something else.
Yeah,
but
I
it's
put that in the script, but I think I got rid of it.
But it's that small man syndrome thing of Trump has to be like. Apparently, Trump and Starmer didn't even speak. Trump's been looking at the British media, but for a world leader to effectively announce the resignation of another world leader before the world leader that's resigning has had chance to put a statement out is just insane. Like, surely there's no precedent for that. I don't know. I'm looking at you both, wondering if either of you can think of an example where that's happened before. But
it's unprecedented times, and that. But in a way, that's one of the interesting things about Trump, isn't it? Like, he does away with a lot of the social convention that does keep the establishment ticking over, and a lot of it is quite interesting because he just does these things. But it clearly shows a complete lack of respect. But it also points to something else, which is people taking credit for this. Because the other fear is Reform taking credit for it because they were the ones who said, vote Reform, keep Starmer out, and we've already seen Zia Youssef take credit for that on X today, and they're saying, look what we've done.
I think Richard Tice did the same thing and was like, "Oh, see, Reform keep their promises." But it's like, well, how can you attribute what's happened today to Reform? Okay, you could argue that, well, because of how badly Starmer did in the local elections, that could be the case. But you've got to remember that the local elections happened in May. The Gorton and Denton by-election happened in February, where Andy Burnham was trying to stand and wanted to come in and dethrone Starmer before the local elections. And that was because of Peter Mandelson, right? I tweeted about this either last night or this morning, I can't remember when, but for me, people are going to look back on this, and there's going to be commentators that are going to look at what's happened and they're going to say, oh, well, it was Andy Burnham that brought Starmer down. No, it wasn't. It was Peter Mandelson that brought Starmer down. From the moment that the Mandelson story broke last year, at the back end of last year, it was clear that Starmer was going to have to go. But the problem was the Labour Party didn't think that there was anybody else capable of taking over from him. So nobody wanted to lead Labour into what was already predicted to be pretty catastrophic local elections. Even as far back as September, October of last year, people knew that Labour weren't going to do particularly well in the local elections in May. Nobody wanted that on their shoulders, and there was nobody competent enough amongst the front benches or anywhere else to put their name in the hat and come forward. Where Streeting did more recently, but again, it was after more news about Mandelson broke. That is the story. I mean, tell me if you think I'm completely losing it here, but that is the story that broke Starmer down. It was just the fact that they had to wait until there was somebody that Labour thought was competent enough to take over, and for whatever reason, they've I mean, we can talk about it, but they decided that Burnham was the person. But Burnham's attempt to run for power started long before May's election, so Reform can't take credit for that, and I'm sure they can't take credit for Mandelson either. So, but obviously they're going to try and do that. But even in the Makerfield by-election, right, they couldn't use the vote Reform to get Starmer out of line because they knew that actually the vote to get rid of Starmer was to vote for Andy Burnham. I mean, we found that when we went to Makerfield, when we spoke to people, and even Reform's press team that we spoke to said as much themselves. They said, it's funny, isn't it? Because the anti-Starmer vote is actually Andy Burnham. But to say that Starmer's resigning because Andy Burnham won a by-election is only right to the extent that that needed to happen because of what went before, particularly with regards to Mandelson. I mean, tell me if I'm wrong.
I think it was an amalgamation of things. I just think I think Starmer was his own worst enemy. There were just so many blunders that could have been avoided. It was his spinelessness, I think, with just many things, but his inability to make decisions and stick to them. And then when he does attempt to stick to decisions, they are the most atrocious and appalling decisions that could be made. He just was such a... I just don't think he was strong. He wasn't strong enough. The Mandelson stuff, I think, probably was just the nail in the coffin, really. They were like, hey, well, you've all of this stuff that's coming out and you're still very much like, yeah, well, I didn't know about any of this. It's like, no, you must have known about it. Like, who are you trying to convince? So yeah, it was all just messy.
I'd agree. I think when as you were talking, Carol, 99% I agreed with the two slight caveats. I think the only person who brought Starmer down was Keir Starmer, personally.
Yeah.
And
Someone's
also,
just
I
said
think
that. Loop's just said that actually it was Starmer that brought Starmer down.
we're on the same wavelength. And the other thing is, you said the phrase about Streeting being competent to throw his hat in the ring. He's certainly confident enough to, but I wouldn't misequate confidence for competence. In the case of Wes
Did I say he
Streeting.
was competent? Did I say
Or
Wes
maybe
Streeting
he
was competent?
maybe he felt he was competent enough to. Yeah.
Maybe yes, yeah, maybe he felt. Yeah, no, I'm sorry if I gave that impression. I wasn't implying that he was competent, but yes, maybe he felt as though he was. Yeah, okay. No, I don't know. I feel as though I think people. I just feel like with all the commentary today, people have forgotten the whole Mandelson thing because they're all talking about, well, Andy Burnham brought him down. It's like, yeah, but there was a whole series of events. It was like with Boris Johnson. Everyone says that the thing that brought Boris Johnson down was Partygate. It wasn't. It was Chris Pincher. It was appointing a sex pest to the cabinet, or to a high position. Do you know what I mean? It was. It's never the thing that people remember. It was always the, you know, it's always something else that people for some reason seem to always forget about. But I suppose the idea that a Labour Prime Minister has had to resign because the Labour Party won a by-election sounds more interesting on on the headline, doesn't it? It is definitely something that I don't think we've seen before and we've ever seen again. Han You Candle It, sorry, said Starmer's legacy is meep meep. Just made me laugh, that one. Have you seen that one, Harry?
What do you mean? I've just seen that comment.
The meep meep thing. Have you seen that clip? So that was Starmer at Prime Minister's Questions a couple of months ago. He was going to say Mr. Speaker, but he stumbled over it. But what came out was meep meep, and it became a running gag. And the British version of Saturday Night Live ran with it for the remaining episodes as well. Every time Starmer came out, it was meep meep. So yeah, to those of you that saw that, it made me laugh. Michael said, but at least Burnham is anti-genocide. Oh wait, I saw that turn left video. Yeah. Did you see our interview, Harry? We spoke to Burnham and I asked him what his foreign policy agenda would be on Israel and Palestine. And in short, he basically said, well, I called for a ceasefire and I've helped Palestinians, but I'm a little bit too busy right now to think about a genocide.
That was what I got from that clip was I'm too focused on my career right now.
Yeah.
Which when you're talking about genocide, I mean, this is the same thing, isn't it? About not learning the lessons. Like you can't sit on the fence with genocide. There's no two-siding it. It's one of the most evil, horrific things that can ever happen on planet Earth. Like, and if the fact that he's watched what's happened with Starmer, and he's still happy to go live and just say to people like, oh yeah, maybe it is genocide, maybe it's not. Like, who really cares? Like, oh, look at what we're doing today. It just shows that they are not learning any lessons. And I think it just also shows that they don't get the gravity of like how seriously people care about genocide.
Yeah, no, 100%. On the topic of a general election and whether or not there should or shouldn't be one, Indefinite Article 1161 has said, no, what a general election would win Burnham is a mandate. He would then have more latitude to be more, to not be more of the same. I mean, Burnham's made a very deliberate effort to not be associated with this Labour government. All of his campaign material, apart from a few placards that I think had been recycled during the by-election, all of his campaign material was "Vote Burnham for us." No mention of the word Labour anywhere, not even in the imprint. The word Labour didn't exist. Obviously, it would have been on the ballot, and apparently it was touted before the election that if he was to win, Keir Starmer wanted to offer him, a significant role in government, and Burnham's people said that will not be happening. He definitely wants to be seen as separate to what has gone before. And I suppose the argument for a general election is that that would definitely, give him that mandate of saying, well, actually, I'm offering something different. Elect me, give me 5 years to offer change. What I worry about is whether that would work. I think an early general election now is inevitable, and I think that just because of what's gone before. Rishi Sunak didn't call one, but and nor did Liz Truss, which is why I think Andy Burnham himself and others called it. But even Boris Johnson ended up calling a snap election. Theresa May called a snap election, didn't work out particularly well for her. But I think if he is going to do it, and he has talked about possibly there's rumours that he's weighed up whether or not he should. I think what he has to think about, is the best time to do it. If Andy Burnham becomes Prime Minister in a couple of weeks' time, let's say there's no opposition against him and there's no need to have a leadership election, and he gets a coronation, and then he says, right, we're going to have a snap election through the summer so we can come back in September and get things going. Please, heaven no, make sure that does not happen. But let's say he does that. I think Reform will walk it. Because they'll say, well, what's the point? We've had all this Labour. It's arrogant. You think you can come in and change it, and you're still Labour. We're not going to do it. However, if he waits and he says, I don't know, calls one in May next year to coincide with the local elections, it gives him a little bit of time to try and prove to the electorate that he is offering something different and that he can be trusted to offer something different, which may then lead to them hanging on to a majority. But I think the real question is, and I'd be interested to know what you think about this, is he going to give us anything different? Oh, Sarah, you're muted.
Sorry, but you talk about Burnham? No, he won't.
Yeah.
He won't give anything different. He's still part of the Labour Party machine. Like, this guy, one point in time was part of Labour Friends of Israel. Like, I'm not saying that that's his whole personality, but if you want to know whether this guy has anything tangible about him, just listen to what he says. Everything he says is such a flip-floppy bloody answer. It's so, like, wishy-washy. What do you stand for? And what will you get done? Like, what will you get done? I understand that, mayor of Greater Manchester, whatever, and people like that. But being a mayor is very different. Like, you're now, and he knows that. He knows. He's been in politics for a very long time. He knows what's coming. And he knows that he can't just be some vibesy politician. He needs to be tough with it. Like, and if you're not going to be tough with it, people are going to see right through it. Then, Andy, you will just fall just like Starmer. You'll be outside saying, I'm now going to hand in my resignation. So, like, this is what will happen. So if he wants to be different, come up with something tangible. If not, stick to your vibesy politics, and you're in the same category as Farage and Lowe and all of those idiots, and Starmer too. If Labour doesn't stand for anything anymore, and I don't think he has a sense of direction. So we'll see. I think it's one of those we'll see.
Harry?
Yeah, I agree. I think if he was going to do that, the time would have been like now or in the last few weeks, because we know Keir Starmer's politics isn't popular. So why not come in hard with messages of like anti-austerity, of change, and do that now in the by-election, which he still would have won a wart. If anything, he'd probably done better because it resonated with people. If he's not going to do it now, why is he going to do it next year? I think he might opportunistically watch the polls, and if there's a spike, he might try and take it. But I don't see that happening because the ship is going to be sailing in the same direction. And I think it was Yanis Varoufakis who said once, the problem with being the economics, the finance minister of the EU, is that you only have as much power as the finance minister of the EU. And it feels a bit like that with the Labour leader at the minute. Like, they've only got as much power as the Labour leader, which isn't enough to change course, because what they've done is, when you cut your ties with your membership and rely more on finances, you're ever reliant on that. Like, they've sold organised labour for organised money, and organised money only works when organised labour lets it happen. But the point on that is that you're then reliant on that. You can't rebuild organised membership overnight, so they're subservient now to BlackRock, they're subservient to those donors, they're subservient to that. So I don't think he has the ability to change tack, even if he wanted to.
I just want to bring up Jacqueline's comment, who said, in an exchange with Edward, Jacqueline said, "I'm worried that Burnham will make the Labour Party palatable enough for those that hate Starmer but don't watch independent news channels like this one, or No Justice, or My Left Eye, etc." I mean, do the Green Party need to be worried? Because at the moment, I think that the Greens are going to experience, certainly temporarily, or at least temporarily, a dip in support once Burnham becomes Prime Minister from those voters who are not members of a political party, they're not activists, but have given their vote to the Green Party because they've turned away from Labour. I think that my prediction is that those voters may go back to Labour, albeit temporarily, until they get a feel for what Burnham is actually offering.
Maybe you're right. Like, maybe there will be a temporary dip. It depends on how the Greens respond, really. Not respond as in like how you're going to respond to Burnham winning. It's just like, what are you going to do to cultivate a really, really solid base?
Well, they're coming out fighting for the Manchester mayoral election.
They are,
and,
which is great.
I think they've got a brilliant candidate with Geraldine Coggins, and I think that they're definitely fighting that race to win. And actually, winning that would set the Greens up very well if they can win that, because if Burnham is coronated, it's going to happen before the 30th of July, which is the date for the Manchester election.
It just means that the Greens need to be more aggressive. Like, I've always said, I want the Green Party to be bloody aggressive in their approach. And I think Zach Polansky is aggressive. Yeah. But I need them to continue up the momentum of aggression. And to not fold, really. That's all.
Harry, somebody asked us the other night, after on the by-election special on Friday, whether or not the Green Party's response to Burnham, especially if he was to become Prime Minister, should be to move even further to the left to try and offer something different. I mean, that's not necessarily assuming that Andy Burnham's offering anything particularly left-wing, but would you agree with that? Do you think that they need to do that? And if not, or even if so, what do you think the Greens need to do next to try and keep momentum going in light of what's happening?
I mean, I think it's a big if, because that obviously predates itself on the fact that Burnham does tack left, and if he's tacking left, obviously the way to do that is to move that. We've seen the Overton window just shift dramatically to the right, and that's intentional. So yes, we need to kind of hold strong on those lines, but actually I think the main thing for me, so when I heard about this news of Burnham initially standing, I thought, kind of well played. Like, if I was a Labour enthusiast, if I didn't really care about the actual politics of it all, but just was tribal loyalty to Labour, I'd be like, this is the right move. But what they're doing again is they're going for the left to try and diminish the left, because they see the left as more of a threat than the right. And it's the same as when they refused to stand, a candidate seriously against Farage in Clacton and fought the Greens in Bristol instead. It's the same thing. They would rather diminish the left than the right, because the same people influential in those circles would do all right under a right-wing government. They would do all right in that space because it would still forward private interest and the same things. So again, it's that same narrative of they're trying to quash the left, but without delivering on those promises. Now, my hypothesis is they won't deliver on those promises, which is why I think it doesn't matter. I think we just have to stand strong and show integrity, because I think the left are just fed up of people without integrity, and actually politicians that do. Like, just look at Jeremy. Still to this day, he's one of the most popular politicians, and however they like to spin it, he delivered the largest amount of votes for Labour. And the biggest membership, and I think that integrity matters. So I think we just need to keep doing what we're doing. And do you know what? In all honesty, and I'm saying this as agreeing myself, we just need to get not tangled in it. Like, let Labour play their games, let them do what they like, let them do their infighting, let them coronate Burnham, let them all try and convince. We've got West Streeting trying to pretend he's socialist, for goodness sake. Really, left-wing people don't fall for any of that. Like, it's nonsense. Like, people might be bought in by Burnham a little bit, but we just need to get organised. Let's win the mayoralty. Let's grow our membership. Our membership's it's growing strong, but let's build in our local branches. What we need to be doing now is we need to get in every single Green Party member out chatting to 2 or 3 more people who aren't Green Party members and getting them in. We need to be tapping into those new resources, tapping into their skill sets to strengthen local branches. We need to be winning the mayoralty now. We need to be going for the next mayoralties in 2028 that are happening, and then we need to be ready for a general election. So I would just say ignore Labour. They're a distraction.
Be aggressive. Facts. This is how you be aggressive. This is how you respond to it, though. You don't respond to it by going, "Oh, we're threatened by Andy." You respond to it by actually just cultivating your base even more. Like, you just go out, you get out there, like, just continue what you're doing and be fucking aggressive with it. Fucking agree. I agree with that, Harry.
And that was I think that was a mic drop from Harry there, so we can probably wrap up. Just before we go, we've had some more super chats. Michael's gifted
Michael.
1 turn left membership. Deus Ex Ollie is gifted
Thanks, Ollie.
5. And we've had a question from not really Rachel Atwood, $2, saying, will Burnham be the first openly Catholic PM? Well, my understanding is we've not had an openly Catholic Prime Minister before, although we have had Prime Ministers who are baptised Catholic or that have attended Catholic Mass, etc. Andy Burnham has apparently said in interviews that while he had a Catholic upbringing, he wasn't particularly religious, but he did say that Catholic social teaching underpins his politics. So, I mean, who knows? Let's wait and see, I suppose, would be the answer there. It doesn't seem like Andy Burnham himself even knows. So that's the story of the hour, I think. SWA Alex has also gifted 1 turn left membership. But yeah, thank both. And,
thanks so much.
Yeah, see you again.
Thanks, Callum. Amazing. Great comments. And thanks so much to you, Harry. Honestly, it's been an absolute dream to have you today. Your analysis has been just so bloody top tier. Like, I feel like I've learned a lot. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. It's been great.
Thank you so much. It's been great. Thanks all of you as well for watching Normal Island Live on Monday with me. Don't forget you can support us by visiting turnleftmedia.co.uk/support. We have merch, which you know is always a good sign. A very established media organisation. We try to be. And as you know, we stream every Monday, Wednesday and Friday. Am I allowed to mention MDF, Callum? Yeah. So there won't be a show on Friday because we'll be at the Media Democracy Festival this weekend again. And I'm panelling. Imagine me. It's like I have some useful things to say sometimes. No, I don't know if it is. Callum's just whispering in my ear. But no, yeah. So it's really, really exciting times. Panelling on Saturday with Sangita. Yes, and there's gonna be lots of great interviews. So yeah, it'll be really, really good. What? Who am I on the panel with? I'm on the panel with Sangita Maiska. Who else? I didn't see. Yeah, it's a cracking panel. It's on media state collusion and propaganda, all that sort of stuff. All that good stuff. Hamza Youssef. Nima Akram. Yeah, from News Cord. Mark Hattis. Should be good. And obviously Sangita. Yeah, so it should be good. Media state collusion. That's all I heard. But yeah, I'll be prepared. Don't worry, guys. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say. Super exciting. Cannot wait to see you guys again soon. Remember, Monday, Wednesday and Friday, but not this Friday. So hopefully I'll see you guys next time.